What if the heroes we were taught to worship were actually the villains of history? The men we print on money, name schools after, build statues for. Some of them were slave owners, rapists, warmongers, and worse. We call them great. But greatness, as history tells it, has a habit of hiding everything else. We admire these men because we've been told they changed the world, and they did. But changing the world doesn't automatically mean you made it better, because sometimes the same people we celebrate for their brilliance also left behind a trail of destruction. This isn't about canceling the past or judging historical figures by modern standards. It's about looking honestly at the contradiction when someone's so-called greatness directly betrays the values they're remembered for. So in this video, we're going to pull back the curtain on some of history's most legendary men and uncover the side of their story that rarely makes it onto plaques. Let's start with one of the most revered names in American history, a man whose legacy is practically synonymous with liberty, yet whose actions told a very different story. America's most famous contradiction, Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, the guy who wrote the phrase, "All men are created equal," the father of American liberty. Except he didn't mean all men, he meant white men, more specifically, white landowning men, and even more specifically, white landowning men who weren't enslaved. Because while he was penning iconic lines about freedom and justice, Jefferson owned over 600 human beings. One of them, Sally Hemings, was a teenage girl he enslaved and had multiple children with. Historians agree she couldn't consent. So not only was he a slave owner, he was a rapist. Even for his time, Jefferson's contradictions were glaring. He publicly criticized slavery, sure, but he also profited from it his entire life and freed almost no one. He once wrote that black people were inferior to whites in both mind and body, and he made sure his plantation stayed profitable right up until his death. Jefferson didn't just fail to live up to the ideals he wrote about, he actively betrayed them, and yet we still treat him like the face of freedom. Speaking of faces, our next example is about the man who cracked open the human mind. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, the guy who made talking about your feelings kind of cool, and who helped turn therapy into a thing. Without Freud, there's no modern psychology, no Jung, no dream interpretation, no Oedipus complex, unfortunately. Because yeah, Freud was also a complete mess. He built entire theories based on very little actual evidence. He dismissed his female patients as hysterical, promoted weird sexual explanations for everything, and was absolutely obsessed with cocaine. Like, medically obsessed. He handed it out like it was Tylenol. And while he framed himself as a revolutionary thinker, many of his ideas weren't just wrong, they were harmful. He chalked up actual trauma to repressed desires. He told women their abuse was just a fantasy. And let's not forget, his go-to explanation for any behavior was basically, you want to sleep with your parents. Freud wanted to understand the human psyche, but he rarely stopped to examine his own biases. He claimed to be a scientist, but refused to revise his theories. And despite the damage he caused, we still refer to him as a genius, because apparently, if you invent a bunch of buzzwords and chain smoke through your legacy, people just assume you were brilliant. Freud reshaped how we think about ourselves. This next man reshaped how we see the world. Now, if Freud got inside your head, this gentleman wanted to rearrange it. Pablo Picasso is often called the most influential artist of the 20th century. He reinvented art, created Cubism, painted Guernica. But what most people don't know is that Picasso treated the people in his life the same way he treated his subjects on canvas. Fragmented, distorted, and often disposable. He cycled through women like paintbrushes, using them for inspiration and then discarding them when they were no longer useful. His relationships were riddled with emotional abuse. He once said, there are only two types of women, goddesses and doormats, which gives you a pretty solid idea of how he saw people. Two of his former lovers died by suicide. One of them, Françoise Gillot, wrote a memoir exposing his controlling and cruel behavior. Picasso threatened her, blacklisted her in the art world, and told their children never to see her again. He could capture the agony of war in his paintings, but not the damage he caused to the people who loved him. And still, we hang his art in museums and quote him like a prophet. Picasso manipulated those closest to him in private. Our next example, on the other hand, exerted his influence on the global stage. Let's shift from art to action. Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy, the bull moose, the guy who wrestled bears, built national parks, and told you to speak softly but carry a big stick. He's often remembered as a progressive force in American politics, and in some ways, he was. He busted corporate monopolies. He fought for worker protections. He helped launch the conservation movement, but he was also kind of a raging imperialist. Roosevelt believed in the superiority of the white race. He openly supported eugenics and spoke about Anglo-Saxon dominance as if it were a divine right. He glorified war and conquest, helped the US take over the Philippines, and justified violence against indigenous peoples and non-white nations under the guise of civilization. He said, and I quote, "I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are dead Indians, but I believe 9 out of every 10 are." He preserved nature while helping destroy entire cultures. He hated big business corruption, but loved military aggression. Teddy Roosevelt gave us national parks, but also helped pave the way for the American empire. And now, let's step into the ring. From the battlefield to the boxing ring, greatness has always been loud, complicated, and personal. Muhammad Ali. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, the greatest of all time. Ali was more than just a boxer. He was a poet, a provocateur, and a principled activist. He refused to fight in Vietnam, spoke out against racism, and stood up for his beliefs even when it cost him everything. That takes courage. But Ali was also, well, kind of a dick, especially to women. He cheated constantly, fathered children outside of marriage, and treated his wives terribly. He often belittled and publicly humiliated his opponents, even calling Joe Frazier an Uncle Tom and a gorilla. Frazier later said, "Those words hurt more than any punch in the ring." Ali preached peace and self-respect, but often failed to extend either to the people closest to him. He was a man of conviction and contradiction. And while we should absolutely honor what he did for civil rights, we can also acknowledge the pain he caused in private. Ali showed us how someone could be beloved by millions while still deeply flawed behind the scenes. That tension between public image and private reality isn't unique to him. It's a pattern we've seen again and again, and it brings us to our next example. The man who built dreams, Walt Disney. Creator of Mickey Mouse, architect of Disneyland, the father of modern animation. His empire shaped generations of childhoods, but behind the Magic Kingdom was a very different man. Disney was a ruthless businessman who crushed labor unions, underpaid animators, and blacklisted employees during the Red Scare. He was accused by peers of being anti-Semitic and reportedly welcomed fascist sympathizers into his studio. While the company denies much of it, the aura around Walt wasn't always so family-friendly. He obsessed over control, often micromanaging projects and cultivating a carefully sanitized image. The man who gave us princesses and fairy dust made sure no one questioned who really ran the kingdom. And today, the Disney brand is a multi-billion-dollar machine, built on the back of a man who was far more interested in legacy than accountability. From a man who sold us fantasy to one who sold us a lie of discovery. Let's take a darker turn, Christopher Columbus. The name alone sparks debate. For centuries, he was celebrated as the brave explorer who discovered America. Statues went up, streets were named, schools taught his story as one of heroism and discovery. But what he actually did was kickstart one of the most brutal periods of colonization in human history. Columbus enslaved indigenous people, tortured them, forced conversions, and helped establish the transatlantic slave trade. In his own journals, he described cutting off hands, dismembering people, and selling girls as young as 9 into sexual slavery. None of this is revisionist history. It's in his own words. The only reason he was even sailing west in the first place was to find gold and make money. And yet, for generations, we celebrated him as a symbol of courage. Now, let's end with a man whose name doesn't get brought up nearly enough when we talk about greatness and toxicity. Ernest Hemingway, Nobel Prize winner, literary icon, the man who redefined American fiction. Hemingway was known for his terse prose, macho swagger, and a life lived at full tilt. He hunted big game, covered wars, boxed in bars, and drank like it was a competitive sport, but behind the bravado was a deeply troubled man. Hemingway was emotionally abusive, manipulative, and treated the women in his life as disposable characters in his personal epic. He was a serial cheater, an absentee father, and had a pattern of driving people away with his cruelty and self-destruction. His hyper-masculine persona wasn't just a writing style, it was a weapon. Even his literary brilliance came with baggage. Hemingway glorified violence, dismissed vulnerability, and framed misogyny as rugged wisdom. He left a legacy of influence, yes, but also one of emotional wreckage. So what does it actually mean to be great? Is greatness about influence, about bold ideas? Is it about how many lives you changed or how many you damaged on the way? We should absolutely acknowledge what these men accomplished. Some of them changed the world, but changing the world doesn't automatically mean you made it better for everyone. Maybe being great at something doesn't mean you were a great person. Maybe, just maybe, we should stop treating greatness like immunity from criticism. You can admire the work without idolizing the man, a distinction we rarely make. You can celebrate the achievement and still hold space for the harm, because history isn't clean, it's complicated, it's messy, and if we want to learn anything from it, we have to be willing willing to look at the whole picture, not just the part that fits on a plaque. Some people shape the world, but that doesn't mean they deserve statues. Because greatness without accountability becomes mythology, and mythology without truth, that's just propaganda. Before we build another statue or name another school, maybe we should ask what we're really honoring, the person they were, or the comfort their myth gave us. Because deep down, maybe we're not just afraid to confront who they were. We're afraid of what that says about us. If you want more videos that challenge the way we talk about history, power, and people, then go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.